Welcome everybody to our final event over Design Week, the panel discussion on the future of the design. And today we have four amazing speakers that I'm excited to introduce. The first speaker is Adrian Brady Chisana, founder and president of CX Chronicles. Adrian has been working in customer experience, service, sales and operations, management and consulting for 15 years, or over 15 years. Most recently, Adrian has worked in New York with ACV Auctions, Home Team, One Fine Stay, H Bloom, and other venture capital-backed leadership teams. Adrian has been starting, building, and scaling companies and internal customer-facing teams his entire career. He has an in-depth understanding and appreciation for what it takes to succeed in growth phase businesses, as well as the importance of understanding the power of building a cohesive team focused on people, process, and product to achieve scale. Adrian has started several of his own companies, including the most recent one, CX Chronicles, as well as the CX Chronicles podcast. The next speaker is Denise Rodriguez. She's a UX designer at PLS Third Learning. Born and raised in Camuy, a small town on the northwest coast of Puerto Rico, Denise is fluent in both English and Spanish and has over 15 years of experience as a print and web designer in both the marketing and advertising industries. She also possesses 7 years of experience managing a team of designers and developers. Based on her prior managerial experience, Denise can work on multiple projects simultaneously owing to her keen organizational and multitasking skills. She especially enjoys collaborating with creative teams to find creative solutions to obstacles, and she possesses expertise and skills designing for accessibility. Our third speaker is Aaron Smith. He's the founder and president at White Giraffe Design. As a result of his startup experience and entrepreneurial spirit, Aaron gained diverse experience in building and delivering software products. His rich multidisciplinary background, including product management, user experience, design, marketing, and operations, gives Aaron the ability to launch products that create a pleasurable experience for users and builds business value. He is a motivated problem solver that believes successful product delivery is done through an iterative process with a steady stream of user feedback, allowing for continuous improvement. And the last but not the least is Amber Lundy. She's a senior designer at Amazon UX Lab. Amber is a design lead with an international backdrop. She works with teams to conceptualize and translate designs across diverse modalities, transmitters, and media with a human-centered approach. Colleagues come to her for mentorship, methodology, inspiration, and a glimpse into the future. And a short disclaimer, Amber is here today as a designer representing her own thoughts and opinions, not that of her employer, Amazon, or her team. So with that, I'd love to welcome our speakers. Big round of applause. Thank you for being here on the panel discussion.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you, thank you. So just to ease into our questions, so during the design week, I've been attending the design talks, and it seems like the common theme for our track was designers, user experience experts talking about why we need to focus on users. Why is it important to understand them before we start designing the solutions? So, but sometimes design teams only focus on mainstream users and don't account for edge cases or diverse user base, even though we always talk and remind about it. Let's explore this topic a little bit. Why do you think it's important to plan for edge cases when you design digital products? Any takers?
I can go first. Well, to me, I think it's important to consider all different people and the different ways that they interact with your design. For example, you wouldn't invite your vegan friend to a pork roast dinner. Like, they would immediately feel excluded. So it works the same way in design. The goal is to create an atmosphere, an environment of inclusivity where people feel respected and connected.
Just to jump off of that, I think a lot of this it's baked into the process, right? Like the first step is the research phase and understanding who your users are, and understanding who your users are is included on those edge cases, right? So making sure you're well aware of those so that you can bake the inclusivity into the rest of the design from there, right? You can only do your best with what you know, right? So I think it starts from the beginning of just being thorough in your research and understanding of who is your target, who are your users, and getting a better understanding, and not just assuming, right? Stop the assumptions.
Could you guys give us a little bit overview what the difference between the mainstream case and the edge case for those people in the audience that might not be familiar with the term of edge cases?
I think, one of the things that we talk about a lot with CXC is understanding who your ICP is, your ideal customer profile. So I think that's one of your bullseye, your target, if you will. I think Aaron couldn't agree more when you're talking about learning who your ICP is or learning who the optimal ICP for your business is. You typically stack up a plethora of additional could be ICPs who end up becoming some of these edge cases that we're talking about. And what's funny is some of those edge cases definitely still have a future opportunity for your business. It might not be ripe right now today, but maybe there's a product expansion down the line, or maybe there's a different service offering that they become ripe for later on down the line. So you have your ICP, and then all of these other edge cases kind of stack up to become other future opportunities.
Riffing off of that last point that you said a little bit in terms of the edge cases being future opportunities, I like to make sure that I'm as comprehensive up front in the research and design process of identifying all those possible edge cases that folks refer to as something that may or may not be super likely. But as systems get more sophisticated and as workflows get more sophisticated, making sure that you have a good inventory of those edge cases up front in the design process is what allows you to have reductive simplicity as you get farther down in your process. So you might identify 30 or 40 different edge cases and be able to look at a workflow that you're designing on and say, hey, we can account for 25 of these edge cases by simplifying this part up here. We can remove this one modal over here, or reduce these 2 pages down and account for the rest of the edge cases. And then all of a sudden your product is more simple. You've got better adoption because you're accounting for all those quote unquote edge cases. Just assume that the edge cases will happen.
I think I agree with that. And a lot of that is just making the design better, right? And it's just understanding more.
Totally.
The example you're giving is just making a better design, making it more intuitive, right?
Yeah.
I think the other piece on this though is also understanding accessibility as well. And then there's our responsibility is design, make sure we're picking, right colors and fonts and stuff like that. So that side of accessibility, but then also making sure that from a development side, all the proper pieces are in place as well, to allow for that as well, right?
Yeah, also, I guess following up on that as well, the great thing is once you solve for a lot of those edge cases, you can implement the same solution in the future and in future projects, because you already did the research and you already created your solutions. Now you just need to basically continue using that and evolving it and implementing it.
I think too, though, and with the edge cases though, it's not just a responsibility of design as well, right? It's a responsibility of the business initiatives that we also, they're setting the priorities, right? We can only do so much, but as the designers, it's our job to bring those to the surface, right? And make them aware of them so that if they want to prioritize the work, because at the end of the day, stuff has to happen in development, right? It's that just flow, it's that cycle, right? So to finish up my rant, circle back, right? It's really getting down to us just owning it and educating internally and, doing the best we can with our design, but then making sure that it's it's actionable throughout the rest of the company, I guess is the best way to say it.
Yeah. Well, with that, do you have any recommendations what designers can do better to make sure that we account for the diverse user base?
I like to try and bring that up front in the process as much as possible, depending on what phase of the project you're coming in to the design work on. I think you can have, if you're design forward on your team and you're influencing product requirements and you're able to write in those workflows up front as opposed to more towards the back end production, you can account for those accessibility centered use cases up front in your design a lot easier. And I think riffing off of something Denise was saying, you end up reusing those components later on in other designs because those accessibility centered features that you design have an ability to become mainstreamed so broadly once they're brought further up in the process. So if you focus in on those quote unquote edge case types of customer use cases really early on, you might find a feature that's super innovative for the mainstream user base that you never would have thought of unless you were thinking about that customer in the first place.
Yeah, you know, Amber, to build on that, I think one of the big things that I've seen time and time again too is understanding the sooner that you can build out a series of diverse personas or customer segments that allow everybody, whether it's sales, whether it's ops, whether it's product, whether it's finance, you name it, to understand what type of customer you're talking about in a given situation, it makes it so much easier to bring them through not only the entire customer journey, but it makes it easier for the business internally to know how to actually navigate those different complexities. You might have, for example, an enterprise customer segment is going to be wildly different than an SMB customer segment, right? They're going to have different expectations. They're going to have different things that they care about. They're going to have different price points that matter to them. So the quicker that you can develop even just baseline personas and segments, it makes it a huge difference. The other thing too is I know, like, going on to the UX and the product side, this is where you guys can start to do some of your magic. The faster we understand what type of customer we're talking about or what type of customer we're talking about serving, you can begin building product or building your site or building your app to reflect what's going to resonate with that type of persona or segment the best.
Any recommendations? So if we're talking about, design teams, because, sometimes, we're humans, sometimes we don't know what we don't know. Are there any best practices or ways we can, I guess, put ourselves in the shoes of those users that we're trying to design to, that we might, not experience their struggles in our day-to-day life, but we still need to, think, what they might be going through? Do you have any recommendations for that?
I would say that, one, have you ever tried to navigate your website without a mouse? Have you tried to use a screen reader platform? Definitely, like, try to think of different scenarios and test for them, like test your website. That's something that we do at our company. We have a mandate that basically everything that we design and build has to meet WCAG AA standards. So we think of accessibility from day one. The design team, the developers, and the QA teams, we are in constant communication, like, throughout the life of the project. And we basically try that by the time the project is nearing its end, it's going to QA. There are very few bugs, if hopefully none, that we have to fix at the end. That way also, it's like the responsibility doesn't just fall on one individual or a small group of people. It falls on the whole team, basically everybody that has touched that project. We think of accessibility from day one, and we continue to talk about it and think about it until the project is delivered to the client.
Just to jump off of that, Denise, too, I think this really resonated with me. What you said there was really getting into the shoes of these people, of just your users, right? Like, and again, across the board, right? Like, get out, get away from the computer, understand them, put yourself in their shoes if you can, right? If you're fortunate enough to do that. If not, like, talk to them about what their problems are and understand them more, listen. I think from that, I mean, I usually, before I go into a research project, I've always liked to capture the assumptions internally first of the users, capture those, write them down, and then go and talk to our users and then compare them. And that helps bring that buy-in too internally of just like, okay, this is what we actually know, and this is what we thought. How does that map out, right? Like what will we miss? Because that is the cornerstone, right? And the cornerstone is really getting to know them, and that is, a lot of it is not done behind a computer, right? It's just getting out and getting on the phone, talking to them, or doing what they do.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think
Denise,
actually a lot of that research and the profiles that Adrian was talking about can become super useful when you start adding additional lenses to them. Similar to like what Denise was saying, in order to start with the most empathetic position possible, trying to get into those customers' shoes as much as you can. I've spent a lot of hours trying to like cook with a blindfold on. When I was designing for people with diabetes, I was pricking my finger with a blood sugar monitor because I've never had diabetes and I needed to go through this experience. And I did journal documentation of all of my assumptions and findings, noting them as a hypothesis that needed to be tested, because I'm never going to be these people. I have assumptions I'm getting out of this whole embodiment experience that need to be checked later on through some more ethnographic research or going and having customer interviews. So you can validate or invalidate those assumptions before you start building them in as features and workflows in your products.
I was going to say, Amber, it was super well said. I was going to say, when you, like, all the things that Aaron was talking about, all the different mediums that you can perform to try to get down into what the end user is really thinking or really feeling or really wants to know about a product. Spot on, Amber, because I think knowing while you're doing all that, it's really important to understand the difference between your common cases and your special cases, right? Common cases are the ones that's literally going to impact any user that your product touches, right? Those are going to be the ones that literally every time someone logs in, every time someone clicks something, every time someone buys something, if you have a common case issue, you got a problem on your hands, because that's going to be every single user is going to touch that issue or touch that bug or touch that problem. If you've got one really, really squeaky wheel customer who loves to tell you everything under the sun around what's going on with your product and how bad it sucks or what it needs differently, if it's literally the only person out of 100, that's a special case situation. You should still use that feedback and you should still do something with it, but know the difference between common case and special case, because that's going to save you and your team and your business a lot of time and a lot of money.
Well said, well said. I think a few of you mentioned the topic of accessibility. So, you know, the design accessibility is definitely a very hot and trending topic these days. I see a lot of companies catching up and starting to understand the value of implementing those design best practices in their websites, web, mobile, digital products. In your line of work, how do you incorporate accessibility standards, whether you're working on a digital product or a physical product?
I'll go. Yes. So for my team, since we're doing a lot of speculative design and kind of product upfront type of approach, or design upfront type of approach, we try to bring the lens of accessibility into the very start of the process in order to look at problems a little bit differently and discover features that we never would have thought of otherwise. Because those, like I said earlier, those quote unquote, you know, accessibility centric features that you might come up with by thinking about those customers get mainstreamed. And with something called the curb effect, I think everybody enjoys that little curb dip that was created in the sidewalks a long time ago. It makes it easier to haul your luggage. It makes it easier to push a baby carriage. It was also supposed to make it easier for people with a wheelchair to go about their business on the street. And it was initially put in place for those folks, but it became such a mainstream, highly valued feature. That same exact thing happens with technology. So if you can kind of do that design up front, then you get more innovative products that can be adopted by a broader user base. And if you look at the data, the overwhelming majority of people that have expendable income to actually purchase digital products, they're getting older and older. And as we get older, we tend to start accruing disabilities over our lifetime. So if you're not thinking about this up front, you could be limiting your customer base severely based on your design assumptions.
I guess I'll springboard off of that. Well, no, I mean, Amber, I think it was just, you hit the nail on the head, right? I think the biggest thing with accessibility, right? It's, you know, and I think this is the thing everyone has to understand too, right? Like out of the box, like an MVP, like it all depends on the state of the product, right? And the time frame you have and the resources you have. Is the thing going to be perfect day one? Probably not. And I think a lot of this too is, as design, you got to constantly push for it to be perfect and constantly learn for those nuances or for those added features that then can get in, to not just help your edge cases, but then can also help the collective, right? And I don't want people to think that it all has to be baked in day one, because then you're not, you know, you're turning into like a waterfall approach almost, because there's going to be more and more learning that happens, right? So to keep that learning happening, you need to kind of get out. You need to do the prototyping, but eventually you have to build something, right? So I guess I'm just advocating for the fact of it's never, you know, you never just design something perfect and then release it and then it's just perfect, right? There's that constant learning process that is involved with it. To, you know, the people that you're thinking edge cases day one, you're going to find more edge cases, you know, day 365. It's by that constant exploration that will allow you to find that and constantly improve.
Yeah, Aaron, I guess like piggybacking on that, like, yeah, definitely continual education. And there's so many resources out there that you can just basically start bookmarking and taking tutorials and courses. Like that's how I learned a big chunk of what I put into practice now. Like, and if I can like give a resource out, I wrote it down here somewhere because like I have a bookmark now, so I don't even think about it. But webaim.org, it's fantastic, especially for color contrast. It's just so easy to use. But yeah, like you said, you have to like go out there and like test, because you can think that you are familiar and that you know all those edge cases or everything that has to do with accessibility. But yeah, you won't find out until you actually put it out there and then continue to like test it and think about it and get feedback. It's basically the job is never finished. There's always a little bit more that you can do. My company right now, it works a lot with departments of education. So because it's a government entity, there are actual lawsuits that go into play. So when we are dealing with accessibility, it's not just as a moral standard. It's more because a lot of those departments have actually gotten sued in the past, and now they're really looking like with a little like very focused on making sure that what we are delivering is compliant and accessible.
Yeah, and those lawsuits actually, those I noticed in they extending to private businesses as well. So yeah, it's definitely one of the reasons why businesses starting taking that into account, because it's started affecting them in a very real way.
That's good.
I want to add one more thing on in terms of the compliance side and like going to production. If you're a designer working on production and you're working with your engineering team and you're on like iteration 5 or 6, or even if you're just launching and you've passed off some documentation that has interaction spec, if you don't have screen reader specifications and you haven't taken a dive into the accessibility framework layer itself, there's some design elements that have been left on the table. And there's a lot of engineers that I've come in contact with that aren't necessarily very educated on how to properly configure the accessibility framework in the first place. So they launch what they assume is a compliant product that has accessibility compliance baked in. But because nobody has ever shown them how to properly configure that experience, it falls flat and somebody using a screen reader can't get past the first button. And then you've got a lawsuit on your hands because nobody was having the conversation about how to properly configure that so that they can access the content, right? So as designers, I think it's a whole different exciting world to dive into that layer of the accessibility framework and start working on those like content interactions and those specs on top of like your typical spec documentation for motion and interaction.
Yeah, good call. So, and you know, in the last few years, the user experience concept overall has been expanding beyond its traditional meaning and definition. So these days, when we talk about the experience, it can be user experience, it can be customer experience, employee experience. Then we talk about augmented reality, virtual reality experience. So why is it important, and how businesses can leverage these different, experiences to serve their customers better?
I think it's, I guess I'll take that one. I mean, it really comes down to like, what's the goal, right? The goal of the experience designer, generally. And I mean, I call myself a UX experience guy, but a lot of my roles, I've always looked at every touch point you have with a customer, right? Like it's an opportunity to give them an enjoyable experience. And as a brand, right? Like some of the most wealthiest people are built off of brands. That's how you build a brand, is people trust you and they enjoy doing business with you. And that's the experience. Even when there's something that goes wrong, there still needs a good experience of getting through it. And I think that's where the value lies. And that's where everyone is seeing, that's the growth, right? As they see that value being added. Because if you get negative feedback, especially now with the internet, like it just gets amplified, 10, 100,000 times, right? So I think that's where that is, where the value is with experience design across the board.
I think that the other thing too is as businesses have evolved, as technology's evolved, when you take a look at like a typical customer journey map this day and age, you see within the first couple minutes how a customer journey touches literally every facet of a business. It's the product side, it's the people side, it's the process side. It touches a little bit of everything. And I think part of why you've seen some of this expansion or this additional attention or this additional focus on all these other alphabet soup type terms, it's really because I think people have gotten a little bit more educated around how it all is intertwined. I think the other thing too is there's more and more companies and industries that are actually taking the time to think about what an end-to-end customer journey map or an end-to-end customer funnel actually looks like. I think that ends up forcing a lot of conversation across sales and ops and product and user design. And I think that in and of itself has created more and more dialogue in general. That dialogue's probably ignited a lot more content, because all you have to do is open up your Flipboard and you're going to see there's 10 different articles about UX and CX and EX and all these different things. And I just think a big part of it is that folks are a little bit more focused on how that needs to all come together. The other thing is, Aaron, you just said it, man, like this day and age, if you're going to put out a crappy product or service, all the next customers in line are going to do is look at that Google review, look at that Yelp review, look at that Apple or Android review, and they're going to make their decision on the spot. And if you're a 1 out of 5 star type of offering, you're probably not going to be around that long. Whereas when you're a 5-star offering and you've seen all of these different promoters talking about how great it is or how creative it is or how helpful it is or how valuable it is, and you see that again and again and again, now it's easy to get new business lined up at the door. Now it's easy to get people excited about wanting to minimally try your product or your service. And now it's easy to get on the employee side to get people excited about wanting to work at a business like that or build a business like that or develop a business like that.
Well, just to quickly jump off of that too, I think if you look at the best performing businesses on the stock market, right? They all are centered around user experience, right? And basically what I'm getting at is they've proven the business model. So now from a business perspective, everyone is now, jumping on board and saying, oh, well, we need that because look where they are, right? They're setting the standard. So it's not even, I feel like they've helped with not even having to make it really a business case anymore, right?
I think that riffing off of what the two of you both said, there's something happening in terms of like a convergence of increasing device surfaces. If you look at the age of the mobile phone and mobile technology itself, it's some disruptive like new interface surface may come along in the next few years. And if your design is focused solely on like a web graphical user interface and has no mobile presence and isn't adaptable enough to fit into some other like AR glasses overlay or whatever the new surface type is, then you can quickly get left behind because your experience can't adapt. So I think making sure that your experiences can be modular enough and consumed in those different environments is increasingly important, because Aaron's right. A lot of the customer kind of focused design work that happens now is taking into account this like pervasive, responsive environment where you've got so many Internet of Things objects around you. They're all Wi-Fi connected. We've got Starlink going on, so pretty soon Wi-Fi is going to be everywhere, right? Like your home is going to be connected in a way that completely changes the dynamics of what an experience design really is. So being able to move on that and leverage that in your service provider experience is going to be pretty big challenge and pretty interesting.
Amber, I love that. I love it because like I'm a huge, like augmented reality for me is like the next interface, right? Next. And right now it's just small, but eventually people aren't even gonna have TVs, right? They're just gonna have VR glasses and augmented reality in their house. Like
yeah.
I guess, but that's the thing with design, right? It's like technology, like it's just evolving, right? So you just evolve with it. It's just a new set of tools, a new set of obstacles to overcome, and that's what makes it exciting, right?
Yeah. Adrian, I wanted to follow up on something that you mentioned. So you're in a very unique field. You focusing on the customer and employee experience, and you mentioned you mentioned how that also can help the companies to increase the employee retention rate, right? Increase the customer retention rate. Can you tell us a little bit more, or give us an example of what companies can do to improve their employee experience, for example, and what it looks like?
Sure. So number one, I think that like this whole notion of employee experience or EX, it really simply mirrors everything that anyone on the call knows about CX, right? It's a matter of understanding touch points, understanding key moments or pivotal moments in an experience that people are going to remember and people are going to be thinking about long after the start of that experience. If you think about keeping count, right? It's not all about qualitative. Some of the best, highest performing businesses in the world, they do have a qualitative count on how their employee experiences are trending month over month, quarter over quarter. They understand, they get incredibly nerdy with understanding what type of cohorts you're talking about as well. Are you talking about individuals who have been with the business for the last 6 months? Are you talking about individuals that have been here for north of 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? And they pay attention to that because number one, all of us on this call know it's incredibly expensive to have to make a replacement, right? When you do a false start hire or you just get a bad match, that's one part of it. But the other part of it is the best and the brightest and the smartest people in the world, they want to work at companies this day and age that they're heard and they're listened to and they're part of the whole experience curation, right? And so high level on EX is do some simple things. Set up a basic eNPS count. It's the same exact type of way that you get a basic NPS count on how your business is doing and how likely it is that someone's going to recommend your business to a friend or a colleague. Do the same type of thing for your business, right? It's very easy to set it up. You don't have to do anything crazy with getting expanded, but understanding not only how you're doing, but what people are saying month over month is super, super important. there has been so many times in my career where the employees already have 80% of the answers that the customers are essentially looking for, but no one's cared to ask them. So if you can begin getting a little bit better at counting it, measuring it, tracking it, logging it, you're going to see the trends in the major themes develop literally in less than a quarter. You're going to look at these things for 3 months and you're going to say, okay, month over month over month, these 3 things keep being said. Maybe we spend a little bit of time or attention or money on that. So that'd be like a high level view of how some businesses are thinking about the use of EX.
That's awesome.
Adrian, can I just ask, like, how is that being perceived internally? Because I think what you're like, employee experience, and maybe this is a regional thing, I don't know. Like, how do you feel that it's being perceived, and what are companies, how are they acting, I guess is the best way. Are they open to the conversations and changing, or how's that working?
Well, number one, Aaron, I think it completely depends on the business and the industry type, number one. So some businesses have built their entire ethos on being, one with the employee and the customer, right? And they created that it was built into their fibers of the business. To give you an example of some newer companies, they might look at it. Yeah, there's a little bit of big brother effect where some employees might say, well, wait a minute, if I say what I really think here, is there going to be some type of slap on the wrist? There's easy ways around that. You can do anonymous surveying. You can cover up some of the surveying to make it super clear that it'll be anonymized, and you'll have a poll that will represent like a higher level, but it's not going to get granular with who said what. The other big thing too is I think how you use some of this feedback is really kind of where your value lies. So for example, if you keep asking an employee survey, but you never share any of the results backwards, by the second, third, fourth month, people are going to say, who's this survey for? Who's reading this thing? What's going on here? Whereas if you are sharing month over month over month, here's the top 3 things that you said about what we can do better as a business, as a product, as a service. Here's what we're going to focus on next month. The next time that EMPS report comes out, or next month, people are going to be more prone to click on it. People are going to be more prone to actually add some valuable insight around what they're seeing every day with their customers. And then it becomes more of a drumbeat. It's not really about collecting and doing nothing, but it's really more about a back and a forth, right? A drumbeat is what I like to call it with it. But that's some of the things that we've seen. I'm sure though, every business is going to have a totally different set of rules.
That's a great insight. Thank you, Adrian. So to piggyback on the conversation about the AR, VR, and how we're all going to be cool granddads and grandmas in a couple of decades. So technology is obviously evolving every day, and it's AI, neural networks evolved to the point these days where they can go and generate design. They can generate the video voiceovers. Do you think AI can take over future design jobs?
No. No. Not all of them. No way.
Well, no, I mean, it's just going to be another tool. It's going to be another arrow in the quiver, right? Like it's, you still need somebody curating the AI, right? And then I guess it all comes down to what you want as a designer. What do you want to spend your time with, right? Like, do you being an experienced guy, like, an AI that helps me build a logo quickly or defines colors quickly, like it's a nice tool for me, right? But yeah, it's just technology moving, and it's resources going to the next set of problems, right? And I think that's where it's at. And it allows designers to take on other problems as opposed to, logos. And I say this, and there's probably people that love to make logos out there. I'm not one of them. So, so yeah, call me biased.
I think oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Amber.
I think maybe some of the logo work feels like a little repetitive and a little mind-numbing for some folks sometimes. I'm not a giant fan of doing like the logo works myself, but I do think that that AI, machine learning and AI will definitely be automating some of the repetitive tasks involved in design for sure. I think we already can see there's some projects out on the market that will automate your whiteboarding sketch and turn it into clickable prototypes for you. So that kind of aspect of design is already getting better and better in terms of automation. So some of those early, or maybe some of those top layer kind of repetitive things in terms of production, like let me do 20 different versions of this front end PNG asset to make sure that it's compliant in terms of internationalization. Like that you can outsource to some classifier that's able to rearrange images and content for you, right? Like no designer needs to spend all their brain space on that all the time if there's bigger customer facing problems to solve. So
it's really good. We're talking about logos, but logo is just a part of the brand, right? So now you can really like focus on brand development, brand design, as opposed to, you know, pushing pixels around on the screen and make sure it's just right.
Yeah. I think that higher level, like conceptual, like the systems level design and like the high level workflow analysis and taking insights from research to feature, that kind of work, human beings are going to have to be the thing driving that for a long time until, you know, AI gets a lot more sophisticated.
Well, when it's that sophisticated, then I'm just not going to do anything anyways. So.
We can retire.
I'm just going to go. I'm going to go into one of my sci-fi movies and just, you know, just sit on my my butt all day, watch TV. That's all I have to do. So I'll have robots serving me, right?
You won't have to watch it. You can just pipe it right in.
Oh, yeah. I just absorb it, right? I'm learning kung fu. Watch out.
Hey, Elon is working on it, so just give it a few more years.
I basically agree with you guys. To me, it's not like if it's gonna take some jobs, it's when it's gonna take some jobs. I don't think it's gonna take all jobs. I was actually recently listening to or watching a YouTube panel. I wrote it down somewhere. Are you ready for artificial intelligence? And basically right now, especially because of COVID-19 and companies looking for less contact individuals or like, you know, with individuals, AI is basically affecting every industry. So it's not just gonna impact design, it's right now impacting every single industry that is out there. And actually taking over some low-paying jobs that sadly affect disproportionately BIPOC people, that's Black, Indigenous, people of color. So we can't think and or assume that we are not gonna be affected by this in the future. Hopefully it will be a tool that actually benefits us more than affects us. But yeah, it's definitely going to happen. Maybe not immediately, but yeah, at some point it will definitely impact us.
Yeah, I think harnessing it as a tool in your design kit is the thing people should focus on for sure.
Yes, I agree with that.
You know, guys, and in the CX space, it's as sharp as a company can get with automated conversation, live chat, auto SMS, where like literally nobody's doing anything. There's just all these comms going back and forth to customers. That's all awesome for low severity and mid severity items. And then the minute that there's an issue and the minute that a customer has a breakdown with the customer journey, they want to pick up the telephone. And this is across a number of different age groups too. So this is not just, Amber, when you were talking earlier about the different groups of ages that we need to think about with our customer bases, this is across all age groups where people still want to pick up the telephone, they want to talk to a human, and they want to know that they're either getting a refund, a ticket issue, whatever it is that your company's going to do to remediate that issue. But I think that it's going to improve parts of it, but I think people are still such a necessary part of the whole mix.
Yeah, Adrian, I agree with you 100%. I don't consider myself old, but if I called a company because I need customer service, it drives me nuts.
Oh yeah,
having to like click 20 numbers before I can talk to a real person.
And remember, the big guys do that. The biggest companies in the world, they do that strategically. Remember that. They do that to be able to manage some of their handle rates or to manage some of their inbound volume. They do it strategically as like rocks to push the water in different parts of the river.
Mm-hmm.
Sneaky. Adrian, we have a quick question for you from the audience. Jeffrey is asking, how hard is it to get C-suites to care about building out CX?
Sure. So thank you for the question, Jeffrey. This is an interesting one. I think that, look, the bottom line is more and more executives and more businesses understand that now more than ever you need to invest in your customer experiences, right? I think what I spend a ton of my time talking about at CXC, and whether we're talking with potential clients or existing clients, we say that CX is modern selling. We try to connect it to revenue immediately so that people realize you can be the fastest growing company in the world. Sure, you can bring on 1,000 new customers a day, but if you're going to bring on 1,000 new customers a day and you're going to lose 950 of those customers, do you want to go down that path? Or do you want to go down the path of where maybe you bring on 100 customers a day and then you keep 99 of them because you just doubled your business, you doubled your revenue, and you doubled your bottom line? And I think that it depends on every business. It depends on every leadership team. Everyone's got different motivations, right? But Jeff, I think the biggest part of success that we've seen is when you can connect that CX is directly tied to revenue and to sales and to the way that they can either increase their existing revenues or better yet create brand new revenue streams. That's typically when you have their attention, and that's typically when they want to talk about some of the different things that they can invest in on the CX side.
I would actually just say that's for all experience design, right?
Yep.
Like the same user experience used to be the same way. Now it's a lot more, CX is the new guy on the block, UX is the old guy on the block, right? But like for a long time,
We're still cool.
We're just all experience designers. That's all we are. But yeah, it's just, I think a lot of it is just showing the value, right? It goes back to it, like you just have to show the business value, and that's having data to back up what you're saying, and making your case, right? And then some organizations, I think more the newer ones are more attuned to this, and the older ones are pivoting slowly, right? So
100%. So yeah, if anyone in the audience have any follow-up questions, please paste them in the chat. We do have about 10 minutes left. So let's see, the next quick question for our speakers. So some of you coming from the traditional design background, and some of you have kind of pursued less traditional path in your career. Would you say for someone who's coming to the design field, does it help to just take the traditional path and get the design degree? And if not, if you took the different route, how did it help you to be better at your job?
Lena, can I actually ask you a question first?
Sure.
Who has the least typical path? You know all of our backgrounds because you did our interviews.
Who has the least typical path? Hold on. I would say, let's see. I think Adrian, he's coming more from the business background, and Aaron, you coming from the art background.
Not funny.
What?
Nothing, I'm kidding. This actually, if anybody tuned into the talk I hosted yesterday with Mike Lamont from MT, we touched on this a little bit, right? The design background, the user experience background, the degree, it exists now, right? Like when I was going through school, I got an art and technology degree, right? From the school I was going to. I didn't have anything called user experience. And then just to give people context, I got my master's in fine arts from the media studies department here in Buffalo, at University of Buffalo. We played with web, video. There was even a rudimentary VR going on there too. Really early Internet of Things stuff was playing around in there. So I really don't think the degree matters much. I think it really comes down to like, what are you passionate about? And like the path I took, I learned that I was really passionate about the interaction I was having with people through the things I was making. That was the thing that really drove me. And it just like, I followed that passion, and this route just kind of opened up as technology grew. So yeah, I mean, I know if you're looking for a job and you're looking to check the boxes on the requirements, like, you know, they say you need a degree in HCI or something like that. But I think really it's going out there and just, you know, being observant, looking for problems, and trying to innovate on ways to do that, right? And coming up with solutions. So yeah, I don't think you formally need the degree. You just need to have that passion.
Aaron, I agree with you 100%. A degree alone is not going to make you successful in the design industry. Like, definitely passion and practice is the backbone of the industry. If, like, when I went to school, I went to school for graphic design. The internet was in its infancy. I actually did kind of see the writing on the wall, and took some like web classes when HTML was all TDs, TRs. I took, I took Lingo. I literally don't even remember what was the program, but the language was Lingo. I learned Flash in my first job out of school. Yeah, exactly. So obviously it was a good base. It was a good, like starting point. But yeah, if you start collecting experience and learn what you're passionate about and like work on that, to me, it feels that it's a lot more important than having a degree that right now, half of the things that I learned in it, I don't necessarily practice them.
Some of them don't exist, right? Like,
no.
And that's actually, you brought up a good point that I try to make when I've taught too locally, but these are just tools, right? They're always tools. And we already talked about AI coming in and possibly being a new tool, right? Don't go to school to just learn a tool. Like, learn the practice and what you need to have equipped with you to just, you're going to learn new tools. You're going to learn new languages. You're going to learn whatever, right? So that's just part of the career and growing in your career.
Yeah.
But,
especially with like YouTube nowadays. I don't know about you, but when I was in school, YouTube was not a thing. Like nowadays, I'm on YouTube like half my workday, just like trying to figure, little tutorials hours. Like I haven't used InDesign in a million years. How did you do that thing again? Quickly YouTube search, and you don't have to go to get a whole degree on how to use a tool, like you said.
I'm just happy I don't need those big, thick books anymore.
Yes.
I totally agree but I have to say, as somebody that has degrees, like, I sound like a complete hypocrite, but I don't think you need a degree. I think if you have an appetite and an interest and you can be that like forever intern, then you can learn everything on the job. I went to school before UX was really a degree anywhere either. And I just kind of found my way into it after some folks nudged me towards it, because I was a bit of a computer nerd in high school. So they were like, hey, you can do HTML, you're interested, right? You should go check out this UX thing. And at the time I was studying industrial design, which was, tangible 3D object kind of product design, as opposed to, digitized experiences. So I got an internship and I learned UX from the folks around me, and it just kind of took off from there.
And I think for me, guys, it was, obviously there was some of the fundamental business things that you absolutely learn and they're valuable in college, but similar to everyone on the panel, it was life. You get into life, you get into your first role, you get into your first team, your first business, and you learn a ton, and you listen to what customers are saying, and then you listen to what your teammates are saying. For me, 10 plus years ago, I would not have said I work in CX. Because over the course of my career, the reality is I worked in sales, I worked in operations, I worked in customer support. I got to work in all these different roles that after 10, 15 years, you look back and you say, wait a minute, this is kind of the combination and the aggregation of these experiences. Really, I've been thinking about the customer and the employee experience the entire time. So really, it's one of those things where, you just be open to new opportunities, be open, always say yes when different challenges or opportunities come your way, and just be open to how you can really kind of continuously grow quarter over quarter and year over year.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. We have a quick question from the audience. As a student who's very interested in small business operations and who's just discovering the world of UX, what are some resources I can lean into?
I have two book recommendations that might be good. One of them is Communicating the New, which is if you're kind of trying to do design forward design thinking, building that into systems and building that into a business that's growing. It's a really great resource, really practical, hands-on kind of exercises that you can use with your business partners and with your engineering partners to all get on the same page and drive things forward using design. And then the other one I would recommend is Mindful Design, which has a ton of human-centered design methodology baked into the book. Both of those are pretty new and really good resources with a lot of recent kind of design education, design thinking built into it.
I personally like to read UX Planet and what is it? UX Collective. I followed them on LinkedIn and they're like posting articles nonstop. It's just something I try to read a couple of articles a day, just, you know, stay up to date.
One of my favorite books, and it's kind of the reason it framed what I did. It was Human-Centered Design by Tim Brown. I found it about 7 years ago. And it was something I found that just kind of like really like gave me a foundation and really showed me that this is where I wanted to go and that there was a name for it and that it gave you some tools to start with. I'm sure everyone's heard of or read the Lean UX. I think that's another great resource. And the reason being, taking off after the Lean Startup book, it iterates that kind of iterative approach and constantly learning and accepting failure, right? Failure isn't a bad thing. Failure is learning, right? And you just want to make it quick. That's all you want to do. You want to make it as quick as possible. So those are two of my staples, I guess is the best way to say it.
Yeah, that Lean Design series of the books is really good to read. They also have like Lean Analytics and some other stuff. So
we have Lean everything now.
Yeah. That's the future. After experience, everything is going to be now Lean.
It's a brand, but it's a brand, right? They just built a brand series off of the Lean Startup. So
yeah, no, good stuff. Alrighty, so I think we're good on the questions here. So
one more question from Josh: is good enough design the biggest threat to the UX industry, or did he answer his own question?
I'm not sure if that's a question. Some have make it almost plug and play to have, yeah.
Good enough design always leaves room for somebody else to do better. So, that's
yeah,
what enough design's about.
Good point.
Don't be discouraged if you have an idea and you find somebody already implemented it, because you can improve and do it better or fill the certain smaller niche that solves this problem. So it's all good. Alrighty, well, we're at the top of the hour. So thank you so much for being here today as speakers, as attendees. If people in the audience looking to connect with our speakers, you can find them on your favorite social networks. If you want to connect, ask questions, et cetera. So, but this concludes our Design Week. Thank you for being with us. And we'll see you next year.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
design track. Thank you.